Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
How do you feel about them taking over the building right now?
I think that their cause is a just cause, and I hope that the administration really hears their demands. I think they're just demands.
Do you feel like it was right to hold 3 of the janitor workers hostage inside of the building?
I think that's a really false narrative.
That's what the janitors are saying, that they weren't allowed to leave.
I think that that's a really false narrative.
Even if the janitors are saying that, you're saying that that's not true.
I think that it's a really false narrative that the students took anyone hostage.
How do you feel about some of the Jewish students saying that they don't feel safe here on campus?
I think that this is also a really false narrative that's being promoted.
Do you think October 7th and the attack that happened is a false narrative? Do you believe that some of the women were raped?
Colleague just came back.
So this is what happened.
Can you get out of my face, please?
So this is what you see at these protests. Once you get into the nitty-gritty of what happened on October the 7th, the rape of women, what's happening there, they deny what happened. As you know, that is actually factual now, that the janitorial workers were blocked inside of the building. And anytime you bring that up, the Jewish cause, the Jewish people, the kids that feel unsafe on campus, they deny the reality of it, guys.
Big Intel is barreling down a Marxist superhighway. Welcome to Whistleblower Wednesday on the Rob Maness Show live on Patriot.tv and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, today is May Day, the Marxist favorite holiday, so this episode is very appropriate. What I saw there, it's an intelligence operation in a war against America and freedom. That's what I see in that video, and all of them coming from our campuses right now. I also see an insurgent direct action operation planned and supported by a Marxist adversary, hidden by multiple layers of useful idiots like who you just saw there, ideologically aligned non-governmental organizations and their billionaire financial backers, all underwritten by intelligence agencies. And sadly, probably from our own side and our adversaries, China, Russia, and Iran at a minimum. From today's guest's book, we read, once upon a time, the FBI and CIA fought America's enemies at home and abroad. Now they are tools of a growing police state, attacking the left's political enemies and spying on ordinary American citizens, even parents who push back against radical public schools. How did we get here? In this revealing and thoroughly documented book, a former operative for the CIA traces the origins of Big Intel to a loose network of Marxist academic agitators known as the Frankfurt School. Their ideology appeals to the Ivy League elites populating the CIA, but the supervision of the FBI took longer. It impeded for a time by the Bureau's staunchly anti-communist director, J. Edgar Hoover, but eventually both institutions have succumbed. And today, Big Intel is controlled by cultural Marxists, close quote. Well, my guest today is Dr. J. Michael Waller. Professor Waller is a scholar practitioner in strategic communication and unconventional conflict. He holds a PhD in international security affairs from Boston University. He received his military training, get this, as an insurgent with the Nicaraguan Democratic Force, or the Contras. A senior analyst for strategy at the Center for Security Policy and author. His latest book is Big Intel, How the CIA and FBI Went from Cold War Heroes to Deep State Villains. Mike, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Good to be with you, Rob.
Well, I appreciate your time and coming on. I've been wanting to have you on for a while. and the book just got my attention, and a lot of my audience have asked me to get you on. So I really do appreciate your time. I know you're a very busy guy. When you
I'm really
look
happy to
at
be. Wait,
Thanks. When you look at what I look at in that short clip or these clips from the universities where the students are camping, and you see all the same color of tents, you see outside so-called consultants, protester consultants being revealed in the media. What are you seeing as somebody that has such an educational and, more importantly, on the ground, hands-on background with something like insurgencies?
I'm seeing the exact same thing I saw when I was a high school student, not just a college student, because I got caught up in the anti-nuclear movement in the 70s as an environmentalist, but I really cared about the environment. But I was from New Hampshire. There were people from California, professional communist agitators, fresh from doing the dirty work for Hanoi and the Viet Cong, now up in my state, finding high school kids as they're useful idiots, training them. So we were trained to go up through the salt marshes in canoes and bolt cutters and commit acts of vandalism on the construction of a nuclear power plant, and then how to deal with it when the National Guard came in to stomp us. So this is nothing new. It's all professionally organized, and 98% of the people involved are idiots.
Yeah, the useful idiot terminology, it is a pejorative most of the time, but it's also a very accurate term, Mike. And the big concern I have, though, and I mentioned it in the monologue, in your book, I think gets to a lot of this, is our own intelligence agencies have been overcome by these cultural Marxists. Is it possible that they are also involved, along with our adversarial countries' intel agencies, ultimately behind backing some of these types of protests? I mean, these guys in the Hamas protests, they're very open. They want to. I saw one say, "I want to see October 7th 10,000 times in the United States of America." So they're very open about the desire to do violence. We've already seen violence at a lot of these protests, most of them, as a matter of fact. It just really troubles me when I read your book and haven't seen what I've seen the last 10 years or so, that our own agencies could be holding hands really with the communist Chinese is the biggest threat that I worry about.
Before writing Big Intel, I would have thought that was a crazy question. I don't think that way anymore. The fact is, we simply don't know what the Bureau is doing, and there's no way to find out because Congress really won't hold it accountable. And when you have an institution that was taken over, that's been taken over by people who no longer believe in the founding principles of our country, no longer believe in the founding fathers and everything that makes our country what it is, and they embrace, whether it's foreign communist groups, foreign communist regimes, terrorist groups like Hamas. Have you heard the FBI warn about any of this? The way it warned about, white supremacist right-wing threats and the Boogaloo Boys and all this other nonsense that never came to be. They haven't warned about this once.
Exactly right, man. But I want to give a shout out, since we're talking about the protests right now, to the University of North Carolina frat guys, because the protesters put a foreign flag up on the flagpole there, and the police and these frat boys showed up. These gentlemen showed up to put the U.S. flag back up, and then the frat men, they stood guard and prevented the protesters from trying to tear that flag down and destroy it and put their flag back up. So I want to give those guys a shout out. That gives me hope that our young people are not all completely brainwashed by the Marxists yet, but one of the other questions I have for you, and I was looking at your timeline this morning, and it has to do with these protests, is who is Sammy? Let me see if I can get the name right. Who is Sami al-Arian? Who is that?
Sami al-Arian was a professor at University of South Florida, and he was an organizer of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is a federally designated terrorist organization. He's described as a civil rights activist, as a political activist. And he got close to the Clinton administration and was invited to the White House. And he was close to the George W. Bush administration after 9/11. Because before that, during the 2020 campaign, he was campaigning for George Bush because he had a grudge against Bill Clinton. So he's an example of how foreign terrorists can infiltrate the political mainstream of our country. Now, Sami al-Arian was exposed as a terrorist. He was ultimately prosecuted, convicted, and deported from the United States. But he's just one of many. His wife, just this past week, was up at Columbia University at the campout with the Intifada protesters.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I first heard his name, and then I saw you tweeted out about him this morning or yesterday, and that's precisely why we all ought to be concerned, is because members of our own government, both political parties, too, have invited these people in. Mike, it's just incredible. Well, we've got a live audience here. If we have time, I let them ask a question every 15-minute segment to our guests. And I've got a hand up over in the audience on Spaces Simulcast. Our hosts are Bill and Drax. Guys, who's got their question?
Go ahead, AJ.
Thank you so much for the mic. Thank you, Colonel. Dr. Waller, sir, pleasure, sir. I have a question regarding your book. Not the Big Intel, which is the one that just came out, but the Secret Empire. The question pertains to the fall of USSR, and it fell. Therefore, the consensus is that communists are done and over with. Cold War is over. The world is turning a page, and the clock continues to tick. Now, based on the information that I have, Secret Empire, you start writing it in 1992. It got published in 1994. So from 1994 till now, it's literally 30 years. And in the book, you have alluded to the fact that the opportunist elements within the communist regime of the USSR, basically after the collapse of USSR, tried to gather as many pieces of it as possible and reconstitute it and basically change jerseys, but the modus operandi continued under a new cover, so to speak. So the Cold War continues, communism continues. It just doesn't look like it is, and it was like a shedding of a skin. So from 1994, when the Secret Empire was published till now, Moscow has done nothing but prove you right. Yet I cannot get through to anybody when I make this argument, despite the fact that we have history to prove that. Do you have any opinion on that, sir? Thank you so much for the mic.
Well, there's a lot there. Secret Empire was my doctoral dissertation, so it was thoroughly academically vetted, including by a former Soviet bloc intelligence officer who defected to the United States and became my professor. So I was there with Russian activists. I was in the Kremlin the day the Soviet Union was abolished, when Boris Yeltsin and Ukraine and Belarus withdrew from the USSR. So I saw a lot firsthand, and I was party to Russian groups pillaging KGB offices. And since my dissertation was about the KGB during what I didn't think would be a collapse of the USSR, I thought it would just be the Gorbachev transition, was working with pro-American Russian activists to leverage U.S. aid to Russia, because we bailed out the Russian economy and the Russian military industry, and these ICBMs that are aimed at us now were built with U.S. taxpayer money. So we were working to condition U.S. aid in part to ripping up all the Soviet networks and having a denazification, cleansing operation to expose everything, to expose their agent networks, to expose their spies and their operatives in the West. And the George H.W. Bush administration and the Clinton administration both opposed that.
That's amazing. But it's very apropos. I mean, AJ thinks his question's a little bit off topic, but really when we're talking about big intel succumbing to Marxism, this is a very important piece to this puzzle. Mike, well, we've got to take our first break. But when we come back, we'll look at something that FBI Director Wray said very recently that will shock you. I'll be right back with Dr. Michael Waller on the Rob Maness Show live at Patriot.tv.
darktalk.com, darktalk.com. Now you hit that website, that's exclusive to patriot.tv, so you're able to also help your family and support our network to keep us going as well. Let's go to not only satellite phones, but then you just have regular phones as well, regular mobile phones as well. So you can click satellite phones, or you go back to the top, click secure phones. So this gives you various cell phones.
We are protecting your privacy in ways that no one else does. We've talked about how your cell phone is a government tracking device, how it archives where you've been, what you're up to, who you're talking with, what you're searching on the web, and that information is not private. It is available to the cell phone companies and often sold or used against people in court, right? With these phones, and I'm not trying to say that these are for criminals, these are for people who want the privacy that they are afforded by the Constitution, right? Because we don't think that it's our job to track you. It is our job to provide you with communications so you can go about your daily life.
We've learned through the pandemic we can never be caught unprepared again. And so many Americans, when COVID hit, they had nothing in the house. Stores were shut down and doctors' offices were shut down. And even if doctors prescribed drugs, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, pharmacists wouldn't fill the prescriptions. That was a nightmare.
Now the situation is much worse. We have these horrible supply chain problems. In our emergency medical kit at the Wellness Company, we have 8 prescription drugs that are all potentially life-saving.
Most people who died with COVID, they died in the hospital because they didn't receive early treatment.
Every American family should have one of these.
I can tell you the Wellness Company kit is the answer.
There's an environment right now we're seeing play out on some college campuses, the protests over what's happening in Gaza. Are you watching that warily? Are you concerned about threats emanating from these demonstrations?
Well, of course, demonstrations themselves are not something that we, the FBI, get involved in. But when violence ensues, that's when we get concerned, when you have threats of violence. And so we have seen, even before October 7th, we saw a significant increase, especially in anti-Semitic threats and anti-Semitic violence. And since October 7th, that number has gone up quite substantially.
Are you actively monitoring these protests?
We don't monitor protests, but we do share intelligence about specific threats of violence with campuses, with state and local law enforcement, but we don't monitor protests.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, live here at patriot.tv and in our X Spaces simulcast. And my guest today is Dr. J. Michael Waller, who wrote a book. His most recent book's out. It starts with the title Big Intel. And really, you know, the CIA and FBI have gone from Cold War heroes to deep state villains. And Michael, that I wanted to show that little clip there from Director Wray, because he lied when he said we don't monitor protests, and that goes back to the whole idea behind the fact that these folks have been completely corrupted by cultural Marxism. It's okay for them to lie to the American people. And we know they monitor protests closely. As a matter of fact, this protest, I want them to monitor this protest closely because they're enemies of the United States.
Yeah, well, that's the point. Which protests does the FBI monitor? My takeaway from watching FBI Director Wray's response to a softball question was that he's only looking out for acts of violence. The FBI is not looking at who's behind those acts of violence. Why? What agents of a foreign designated terrorist group like Hamas are operationally involved in these protests? How and why did these protests emerge immediately after the Hamas October 7th massacres in Israel, in direct response to Hamas's call for global jihad and global solidarity? Meaning, the FBI is not even looking at the cause and effect. With the Iranian government, the Ayatollah Khamenei just today or yesterday sent out a message praising these American protests. So, is this Iran-backed? FBI is not indicating it, but he certainly shows no concern when Wray says we're only looking at it for acts of violence. He's not treating it as a counterintelligence issue. And that's where the FBI has just completely collapsed.
Yeah, exactly right. And we know Iran has an alliance them are a part of a military cycle. You think that, and I do, honestly, I think that the Chinese definitely are playing a part in this to at least some extent, because they have so many of their Chinese military age males that have come into the country through the southern border illegally now. I mean, these folks are communist Chinese men that are all military age, most of them, not all of them, I shouldn't say all. And the numbers are staggering. I mean, I'm hearing credible intelligence from open sources that put it at over 100,000 since Joe Biden took office. So I share your concern. I think Iranians are definitely behind a lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and even if they're not involved in these protests, what else are they doing? Are they here as saboteurs? Are they here as assassins? Are they here to spread toxins? What are they here for? And you see them coming in with identical clothes, identical gear, identical military style haircuts. What are they doing? So you've got those people coming over the border, plus you have the ones who are already here, and now Biden is saying, let's bring in more from Gaza and house them here as refugees, permanently. So nobody is watching this stuff. The FBI is too busy going after Trump supporters who allegedly committed misdemeanors, and they're completely ignoring these solid, open Hamas supporters, if not Hamas members. And it's the federal government has designated it as a terrorist group. It's a felony to have any involvement with them. They're providing material support to terrorism. And FBI Director Wray is saying, oh, we're just going to look and see if they might commit some violence.
Yeah. What happened to the FBI that looked at the Soviet Union's communist ideology and studied it in depth, just like the U.S. military did? I mean, I was in the Cold War as a member of Strategic Air Command and U.S. Forces Europe as an enlisted man. We studied the Soviet Union all the way down to their ideology and their economy so that we could understand how to defeat it if we ever needed to. And ultimately, we did defeat it without getting into a major war, Mike. And it's because all of our assets, including the FBI, were studying this and watching for these people and following them and surveilling them and peeling apart the layers of their operations so that when there was a student group that was going out and doing something, the FBI was going to know about it and going to be able to follow that trail all the way back. That's not what they're doing. As you said, they're going after MAGA grandmas and focused on the craziness, which was a protest that turned into a small couple of riots on January 6th. And all of their resources are going towards that. And then Ray refuses to acknowledge that it's an ideology behind this. I mean, is it the Marxism that's infected them that is causing them to basically turn away?
It's a combination of things. It's that the FBI stopped looking at ideological drivers behind foreign-sponsored enemies of the United States, because they just simply stopped looking at it after J. Edgar Hoover. They thought it was old-fashioned. They thought it didn't matter anymore. And we really haven't had a good look at this since the Jimmy Carter period. And so combined with the sort of the lack of a concern about such a threat was a generational shift in the whole intelligence community. We've seen it in the military too, where Marxist ideology isn't a bad thing. It's a different idea. It's a different way of looking at the world, and it's really pretty progressive, and it's inclusive, and it's diverse, and it's fighting against oppression, because we all know that America was founded by white Christian males who were setting up a system to control and oppress everybody else, and therefore anybody fighting oppression is virtuous, and so we always have to be on the side of the underdog. So this kind of sick logic seeped in as it's seeped in through the universities. We're seeing it now, but it's been happening for many decades. These people then go in through law schools. They not only developed critical race theory from this type of cultural Marxism. Prior to critical race theory, they had critical law theory, which they're teaching in the law schools, which is a Marxist application of American constitutional law to deliver a new type of government and a new type of system on our country through case law, through lawsuits, and creating precedents. So this is taught in most of the law schools now. These new lawyers then, with the surplus of lawyers out there, they go into the Justice Department and other government agencies as government lawyers to prosecute new sets of enemies. So most of the jihadis had been gone or hadn't been a big problem for us because we wiped out a lot of them, so many of them. But the U.S. military never sought to fight the ideology. The intelligence communities never sought to fight the ideology because we can't go fighting ideology because it's offensive. At the same time, who's the new enemy? It is now people who fly American revolutionary flags, people who believe in Judeo-Christian ethics and American founding principles, people who believe that America should come first before any other nation on earth. Those are the people who the security apparatus in our country now views as the principal enemy to be watched. So you have all this concern about people on the right, and you have zero concern from the FBI director himself about Iranian and Hamas networks in our country causing this violence on our campuses.
That seems very duplicitous, doesn't it? They don't want to look at ideology on the left and on our enemies' faces and brains, but they certainly want to look at American ideology. And I don't even know if I would consider it right-wing, although the lefties try to characterize it that way. It's amazing. Well, we've got another question, a hand up over in the Spaces audience. Mike, let's go over there to Bill and Drax and see what the question is.
Go ahead, Sofa.
Thank you, Colonel. Thank you, Dr. Waller. So my question is this: in following up with what you're talking about right now, it appears to me that the hang up is on the former Soviet Union. That was the big communist enemy that we were fighting against, and we had their long-term goals actually read into the public record back in 1963, the 45 long-term goals. But then Russia was formed from the Soviet Union, and in my mind, Russia is far less communist than China is. It's far less socialist than the Islamic theocracies that you see currently in the Middle East. Who do you see as the biggest threat, the biggest quote unquote communist threat? Russia or China in the Middle East?
I think communist China really represents by far the worst threat to our country of any force on earth. Worse than the jihadis, worse than Russia. It's really, and we are nowhere near adept at grasping an idea of the nature of the scope of this threat. On the Russia side, though, even though the Putin regime is not communist, it's still an old KGB regime. So those KGB networks, as the old Stasi networks were in East Germany, former East Germany, they were preserved. The agent networks were preserved, and the way the KGB had worked was that they would go multi-generational. So often the children of controlled agents would rise up. When they would grow up and become professional, they would also be agents. So just because Russia is not communist anymore does not mean it hasn't kept those old communist networks. Now, one of the reasons the left finds Putin so unappealing is that he stands up for what he views as traditional Russian non-communist values, and they really hate him for not embracing the rainbow flag and for kicking out George Soros. At the same time, it doesn't make him our friend, and it doesn't make him a communist, but he still has those networks at his disposal. And if you look at some of the journalists and even some of the members of Congress and others who are at the forefront right now of poo-pooing the Islamists and the communist Chinese, you find that they came up through some of these networks. One being Congresswoman Barbara Lee of Oakland, California. She was a Cuban operative, fully recruited Cuban operative. She's still a member of Congress. She's running for the United States Senate now. Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles is another one. The father of now his name just popped out of my head, is he's father of Jamie Raskin's father, congressman from Maryland. He was a Soviet asset running an active measures front called the Institute for Policy Studies. So there was never any accountability for this. Jamie Raskin defends his father's legacy. It's one thing to say, well, gee, my dad made a mistake. I'm not that way. He never did that. So you can see how these groups are going forward multi-generationally to advance more and more extreme ideology to polarize our country and to tear us apart from within.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell people all the time, Mike, you have to remember Vladimir Putin is a retired KGB colonel. He thinks and makes decisions through that lens. You could see it in a lot of his interviews, especially that one with Tucker Carlson. Well, when we come back, I want to dive deeper into Mike's book from this break here and look at subversion, the 4 stages of subversion, the DEI, critical race theory, wokeism that's taken over, especially the CIA, and we'll see one of their ads that's caused quite a stir right here on the Rob Maness Show at Patriot.tv and X Spaces simulcast. We'll be right back.
Hi neighbor, Pat Boone here. Today, I want to help you find some peace of mind concerning your money. Like it or not, we're all living in a financial war zone. That's right. We're watching our hard-earned dollars get crushed by inflation. In fact, recently inflation reached its highest level in 40 years. And on top of that, cash, which has always represented freedom and privacy, is more and more being replaced by a cashless system. That's right. Powerful forces are definitely waging a war against cash. So I'm encouraging you to prepare before it's too late. Call or text the number on the screen for a free report, The Secret War on Cash from Swiss America. Discover how a few simple steps can protect your money as well as your privacy and your peace of mind. So call or text for your free report, The Secret War on Cash, and make sure to mention Pat Boone sent you.
BellaPatriot.com. Let me explain to you what this is. This is an elixir. It's a daily elixir. It is a collagen, and it also has something known as astaxanthin that crosses the brain-blood barrier, that's loaded with antioxidants to take on the free radicals. And then it has something called cat's claw. That is from a bark on a vine in Peru. So these are 3 very powerful ingredients. Now, if you go to BellaPatriot.com, there are your science and clinical trials, right? And if you want to read the science, there it is. You don't get nearly 80 clinical trials for nothing. So again, you want to talk about science, the information behind it, this is it. We highly urge you to check it out. The results for Melissa and I have been very powerful. She and I take it each and every day. It's very simple. You just rip the top, drink it, and then throw away the container. We would urge you to go there, order it now, click and order now, and get your subscription.
When I was 17, I quoted Zora Neale Hurston's How It Feels to Be Colored Me in my college application essay. The line that spoke to me stated simply, I am not tragically colored. There is no sorrow dammed up in my soul nor lurking behind my eyes. I do not mind at all. At 17, I had no idea what life would bring, but Zora's sentiment articulated so beautifully how I felt as a daughter of immigrants then and now. Nothing about me was or is tragic. I am perfectly made. I can wax eloquent on complex legal issues in English while also belting Guayaquil de mis amores in Spanish. I can change a diaper with one hand and console a crying toddler with the other. I am a woman of color. I am a mom. I am a cisgender millennial who's been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. I am intersectional, but my existence is not a box-checking exercise. I am a walking declaration. A woman whose inflection does not rise at the end of her sentences, suggesting that a question has been asked. I did not sneak into CIA. My employment was not and is not the result of a fluke or slip through the cracks. I earned my way in, and I earned my way up the ranks of this organization. I am educated, qualified, and competent, and sometimes I struggle. I struggle feeling like I could do more, be more to my 2 sons, and I struggle leaving the office when I feel there's so much more to do. I used to struggle with imposter syndrome, but at 36, I refuse to internalize misguided patriarchal ideas of what a woman can or should be. I am tired of feeling like I'm supposed to apologize for the space I occupy rather than intoxicate people with my effort, my brilliance. I am proud of me, full stop. My parents left everything they knew and loved to expose me to opportunities they never had. Because of them, I stand here today a proud first-generation Latina and officer at CIA. I am unapologetically me. I want you to be unapologetically you, whoever you are. Know your worth. Command your space. Mija, you're worth it.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show here at Patriot.tv and on our X Spaces simulcast. And we're talking today to Dr. J. Michael Waller, who is the author of a new book about big intel and how the FBI and the CIA have gone from heroes in the Cold War to really the enemies of the American people as actors of the deep state, and focusing on that. And in that recruiting video, that's a recruiting video for the CIA, Mike, that we just watched there. The very troubling parts are really the most troubling are the visuals and the use of the terminology that comes right out of the Frankfurt School, which I might add, those individuals from the Frankfurt School landed at Columbia University, which is where a lot of this stuff has been emanating from over the decades, and cultural Marxism and critical race theory and those kind of things. But using the terminology like patriarchy, the visuals, and the raised fist of the Marxist raised fist that you see from Black Lives Matter or the Communist Party of America. I've seen it on their imagery, is all in that little recruiting video ad where the CIA is wanting people that believe in that ideology more than they want people that believe in America. That is troubling.
It could have been a parody, a really sick parody ad, but it was real. That ad was created under Gina Haspel, the CIA director during the Trump administration, and it was released under the Biden administration. They're looking for people like that. You saw that whole thing. She has got 32 sentences. I had to transcribe the whole thing in Big Intel. 32 sentences. 30 of them are about herself. None of them are about service to America or defending us against our foreign foes.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And you also write in the book about subversion. The 4 stages of subversion and those kind of things. You've studied that extensively. The communists have this flow that leads to eventually the full destabilization of Western democracies or any country, really. What are those stages? And because it links to this idea that we're subverting young Americans to actually serve in the United States government in the instrument, the CIA, that's supposed to be looking outwardly at foreign adversaries and their ideologies, but we've subverted ourselves so much, or allowed ourselves to be subverted so much, that we're actually recruiting that ideology to look at Americans as enemies.
Yeah, it was a brilliant strategy. It was created. I traced the roots back. I had no idea when I was researching the book. I traced the roots back to the strategy all the way to a meeting in Moscow in 1922, so 5 years after the Bolshevik Revolution, at the Marx Engels Institute, where the heads of the communist parties of Europe and the Soviet Comintern, or Communist International, and the founder of the Cheka, what became the KGB, Felix Dzerzhinsky, they all met about how to subvert the West and how to tear it down. And they agreed that there could be no violent Bolshevik-style revolution in the Western democracies. It all had to come through subversion, through causing them to destroy any belief and credibility in all of their values, all of their traditions, their very societies from parliamentary or Republican democracy all the way to the nuclear family. It all had to be destroyed. And they knew this campaign would take beyond their lifetimes. It would take generations. So back in the 80s, we learned about the 4 stages of this type of subversion that the former Soviet propagandist Yuri Bezmenov revealed. The first stage is demoralization. How do you demoralize a society? How do you make them not believe in themselves, but not want to do anything about it either, and feel like there's too big, there's too much against them, there's nothing we can do, so let's not even bother to resist, and if we even try, we're going to get our heads handed back to us and have our lives destroyed. So let's just give up. And that was the demoralization, where we stopped watching for this. And then came disorientation, stage 2. So disorientation is to confuse us. We don't know what's hitting us. We're getting hit from all different directions. Are they Russians? Are they Chinese communists? Are they jihadists? Are they just weirdos? Who knows what they are? Are they, the George Soroses of the world? We can't even tell where it's coming from. We can't even keep track. We don't know who to turn to. We don't know who to trust. So that's the disorientation part of things. And then stage 3 is crisis. What kind of crisis comes where the demoralized and disoriented people don't know anything, don't know what to do, because they're demoralized and disoriented during this time of crisis? That's when the revolutionaries who are organized and who've been working on this for decades, that's where they jump in. They've completed their long march through the institutions. They've taken over the universities and the media and entertainment and communications and government agencies and the huge foundations and culture and law enforcement and so much else. That's the crisis period. And then they act to take advantage of the crisis, and then everything becomes normal. The population's obedient. The population complies with mandates that are normally illegal or unconstitutional. They just don't care anymore. They just want everybody off their backs, and they just want to comply. So those are the 4 stages that Yuri Bezmenov described back 40 years ago.
Well, it sounds like, to be honest, if I'd have said this like 3 years ago, I would have called myself a conspiracy theorist, probably. But it sounds like we're well into stage 4 when we look at the pandemic and all of those things, and then what we see happening today in the face of what happened on October 7th, for goodness sake. I mean, October 7th was significant enough to where it's the most significant attack on Jewish civilians by a quasi-military / quasi-government entity, Hamas, which is the government of Gaza, backed by nation states like Iran and other organizations like Hezbollah, since World War II, since the Nazis did it in World War II. And we actually see Americans on the streets today casually saying that was okay, and that we need more of it here in our own country.
They don't deserve to live.
Is that where we're at?
They're saying.
Is that where we're at?
That's where we're at. I mean, we see it now. They're not hiding it anymore.
Yeah. Wow.
Do you really hear? Where's Senator Chuck Schumer on all of this? Besides giving his occasional bland statement, there's no bigger loudmouth in Washington than him, and he boasts about being the highest-ranking Jewish person ever elected in American politics. He's a Senate Majority Leader. He can call the Attorney General and said, get moving on this. He can tell the president this is going to kill us in the Senate elections. He's not doing that. He's just making he made one moving speech last fall. He held up the House package of aid to Israel for half a year, and then added aid to Gaza and the Hamas team, and then has gone along with everything Biden wants. He has not been a spokesman. There's really no leader among liberal American Jews who's risen up and say we have to destroy Hamas. That's how bad it's gone. And you saw this in America in the 1930s too, where a lot of the American Jewish community didn't give a rip about Hitler, didn't give a rip about the Holocaust that was underway. They were just quiet.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like, before we go to this break, I'll just make this one comment and we can talk about it on the backside of the break. But it seems like even in the face of defeat in the election, this administration wants to continue with its anti-Semitic viewpoints and its anti-Semitic elected officials and not call them out. Not even the highest ranking elected Jewish official in the United States is willing to do it. Well, we'll be right back with J. Michael Waller about his book, Big Intel, and all of the dangers that this is presenting to the United States of America and really the freedom-loving peoples around the world, of which the United States of America is supposed to lead. We'll be right back after these messages.
Darktalk.com, darktalk.com. Now you hit that website, that's exclusive to Patriot.tv, so you're able to also help your family and support our network to keep us going as well. Let's go to not only satellite phones, but then you just have regular phones as well, regular mobile phones as well. So you can click satellite phones, or you go back to the top, click secure phones. So this gives you various cell phones.
We are protecting your privacy in ways that no one else does. We've talked about how your cell phone is a government tracking device, how it archives where you've been, what you're up to, who you're talking with, what you're searching on the web, and that information is not private. It is available to the cell phone companies and often sold or used against people in court, right? With these phones, and I'm not trying to say that these are for criminals, these are for people who want the privacy that they are afforded by the Constitution, right? Because we don't think that it's our job to track you. It is our job to provide you with communications so you can go about your daily life.
The markets are getting crazy, and now is the time to protect yourself from economic turmoil. Silver is in the headlines right now and creating lots of excitement as the price of silver is extremely attractive compared to gold. A call to Swiss America gets you the scoop on whether the silver opportunity is for real. What you'll discover will really blow your mind. Today, silver faces a huge shortage due to the rising demand by military, solar, electric cars, and computers, all of which depend on silver. But right now, silver is priced to sell according to worldwide experts. Now, to help you get started, Swiss America is offering beautiful United States Walking Liberty half dollars, issued by the U.S. Mint from 1916 to 1947 and minted in 90% pure silver for a special introductory price. Limit of $250 per customer while supplies last. So call the number on your screen or visit SwissAmerica.com, because now is the time to rediscover silver.
Fox News alert, the Arab Spring break has officially turned violent. Columbia University over the last 24 hours has gone from a terrorist tent city to a frenzied invasion and occupation. After the Ivy League school failed to enforce its 2 p.m. deadline yesterday, the caliphate spread into Hamilton Hall.
Intifada, Intifada. Long live the Intifada. From the river to the sea. Columbia, you will see. Palestine is almost free. Palestine is almost free.
You guys are the ones dragging people away.
All right, look, this is assault. This is
You're shoving me.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. Here it's Whistleblower Wednesday at Patriot.tv live, and our X Spaces simulcast. And our guest today is the author of the book, Big Intel, on how the CIA and the FBI went from Cold War heroes to deep state villains, really. And Mike, just a little bit more of the clip of now violent protesters supporting Hamas, and I believe that one was from Columbia University. But as we were talking before, it just blows my mind that people of this age group have been so subverted that they actually are open about wanting to do violence on not just Israeli Jewish people, but American citizens that are Jewish people and Americans themselves because of the ideas that we have. I mean, and I think you tweeted about this maybe yesterday. I mean, here's what, 249 years since Lexington and Concord, and the Massachusetts government is forcing illegal aliens to be housed in the Lexington National Guard Armory. For God's sake, I don't think those people voted for that, but these people that say they're American citizens and they're agitators here that are voting with Hamas say that they want to attack us too because we still believe in Lexington and Concord, and we don't believe in this craziness.
Yeah. Yeah, they're vandalizing statues of George Washington and Ben Franklin when it's all supposedly about Hamas and Israel. This is an attack on us. These radicals see what happened in Israel. They're fine with it. They won't address it. They're calling it lies, and they're calling for the same thing here. When they're saying "Long live the Intifada," they're taking an Arabic term by Hamas, again, a federally designated terrorist organization, and they're adapting it to a slogan here in America. And you'll see other videos of them saying, tear this country apart, this is about revolution, overthrow everything. And it's not just some crazy drunk college students, it's faculty, it's administrators, it's the boards of trustees of these universities that are going along with it.
Yeah, I haven't shown that clip, but there's a clip of faculty members with orange vests. So they're organized, they're all wearing orange vests that are blocking the entrance from the police to get into the camp at Columbia University's protester campsite there. And it's the faculty that's doing that. And that's what I wanted to transition a little bit for this segment to talk more about the Chinese Communist Party because they have infiltrated the country. I mean, if you haven't heard of a Confucius Institute at a major university in the United States of America, that's the Chinese Communist Party's influence operation over these students and these faculty. I mean, they've infiltrated through the border. They've gone after farmland and all kinds of acres around not only military bases, but all over the country in order to get control of that land. They're wanting to build factories for electric vehicles in places like Michigan, and our laws don't support keeping them from doing it. They don't support keeping them from buying our farmland. They're entering the illicit drug trade by building marijuana grow facilities and farms that have been uncovered. Bioweapons, biolabs have been discovered, run by Chinese communist military-age males in California. I mean, we are completely infiltrated by these Chinese communists, and then their Marxism may be a slightly Asian flavored, but it's still pure Marxism, no matter what kind of capitalism they've decided to build their economy on. And we are allowing it, and our elected officials are allowing it. And now we have kids at these universities that have eaten this whole thing, swallowed it up whole. Their faculty members have, the administrators of the universities have, and it seems like there's not a damn thing we can do about it.
Well, that's where the demoralization part comes in on Bezmenov's four steps. If we feel like there's nothing we can do about it, then we are demoralized. And that's what they want. They want us to feel isolated, hopeless, demoralized, depressed, and just say to hell with it. So we can't do that. There are ways to defeat them. There are plenty of ways to defeat them. The biggest thing I would do right now is put the squeeze on all the Democrats who are silent about the Hamas networks in terms of the need to smash them. Have you heard a single Democrat, including Chuck Schumer, call on Attorney General Merrick Garland to put the squeeze on these Hamas networks and stick the FBI on them? No, you haven't, because he needs those networks for Michigan to keep that Senate seat in Michigan so he can stay Senate Majority Leader. So there's a lot of other things that we have to hold all the partisans accountable. If you are not speaking out against this, just like George W. Bush said after the Al-Qaeda attack, if you don't side with us, you're siding with the terrorists. And that's what has to happen now. We got to split the Democrat Party apart and get these billionaires to stop funding these colleges, get the federal government to stop subsidizing the colleges by forgiving student loans, and take a lot of action there. Every parent can do this. Every voter can do this. But right now, even student activists can do this. If the frat boys can do it, and the Greeks down at UNC can fight back with these people and inspire so many others, think of what they've done, that great thing. They can inspire others to do the same thing.
That's what it takes, is young men and women taking leadership. It may be just that one moment in time that those young men took that leadership role and they inspired an entire people to stand up, It's
Same
very,
guys
very
for everybody.
interesting, man. I mean, it's go ahead.
Plenty of time for citizen action.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's just very weird. Before we came on, I was looking at some breaking news, and the Biden administration is seriously considering bringing Hamas refugees from Gaza. I put the Hamas in there. The headline was refugees from Gaza. There are no non-Hamas refugees from Gaza. 87% of the people voted for Hamas, and they continue to support them. Everybody that's over 18 has been polled recently. Over 87%. Okay? And they were part of this attack on October 7th and the continued attacks and everything. But bringing them here. Now it's being said, Mike, that the funding for that was actually passed by the Republican House of Representatives and Speaker Mike Johnson. I mean, we've talked a lot about Schumer and those guys, but my goodness, it's like we're stabbing our own selves in the heart.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's exactly what happens. Now, Johnson had a majority of, practically zero. He was up against the wall, but the thing is, to his credit, last fall, he pushed through that support for Israel back when it mattered, with nothing for the Hamas people, and doing it so that it would not be out of the taxpayer, anything else from the taxpayer. It would come out of the budget to expand the IRS by 87,000 armed agents. So that's how he wanted to fund this thing, but Schumer blocked it and blocked it and blocked it until it included cash for the Hamas so-called refugees and a whole lot of other stuff that's really dangerous to us. The House, Johnson says he had no choice but to push it through. I think he caved in, but reality is what reality is. The point is, Republicans voted for this too.
Yeah, and that just on the subversion stages that really makes it difficult for people like you and me and those frat guys, the frat boys, to continue to encourage Americans that there are actions we can take, and that actions that we should take every single day. Are there any more actions from your book, from your experience in life, especially that insurgency that you got some military training at with working with the Contras and everything, that Americans should be thinking about and taking action on that can help get us out of this situation?
There are a lot. First of all, I mean, we think, well, you have to go out and vote. Well, we do have to get out and vote, because part of the demoralization strategy is to prevent people from getting out and voting. And the Biden administration seems complacent. They can do whatever they want, because who knows what they have in mind for the elections this year. Number one, you have to vote. Donald Trump, for all the faults that he had in the past, he did really nothing to curtail any of this. He appointed Christopher Wray to head the FBI. He didn't understand the problem. Now he does. Now he has people out there at a Heritage Foundation and the Center for Security Policy and elsewhere. They're presenting plans with teams of people to do it, right down to the executive orders for him to issue on his first day. If he doesn't get in as president this year, no matter what people think of him, like him or not, then we're doomed as a country. On the local level, there's a lot that people can do. The sheriffs, especially in the southern and western states, have a lot of power, and they have power to keep the FBI and ATF and other federal agencies, to limit those agencies' ability to abuse their power at the local level. Because the local sheriffs and the local cops are the eyes and ears of the federal authorities. But the sheriffs do not have to deputize these federal agents to enforce state law. They don't have to help them in any way if they think it's unjust. So we need to support the good sheriffs who are standing up for the local people, and then get rid of the bad sheriffs who are not. That's the second step. Third step is we have to dismantle the FBI. We need all the functions the FBI has, or most of the functions the FBI has, but we don't need it as an organization that has become irreparably compromised. So you have the radical elements who started coming in 20 years ago from the bottom are now up in the senior management. They're running the nerve center of the FBI. Chris Wray isn't even running the FBI. He's too weak a leader. He's just a Washington Beltway lawyer who got rich inside the Beltway. He's just doing what the radicals in the nervous system of the FBI want him to do. The FBI has to be divided up, separate counterintelligence service, put the criminal investigation service in with, say, with the U.S. Marshals, the FBI Academy with the U.S. Marshals, break the FBI into the different pieces and then take a stump grinder to the rest of it. There's no need. FBI is just a bureaucracy and it's just a brand. So let's get rid of that. And then no more wokeness for anything. The wokeness is the engine of ideological revolution throughout our government bureaucracy and our society. And if Congress can defund all positions, and the next president would defund all positions for anything to do with DEI and wokeness, that means you're not just cutting out the positions, you're pushing those people in those positions out of government service forever.
Well, you're right on the same page that I'm on. We totally agree on everything you just said, Mike. Thank you so much for being here today. I've had your X account up on the screen the whole time the show's been going, so folks know where to find you. And the book's on Amazon. Just type in the words Big Intel. It'll come right up. Dr. J. Michael Waller, thank you very much, sir. We appreciate you. And we'll have you again. When we need to take another look at this, because this is a problem that needs to be looked at often and needs to be rectified, and we can do that. Well, tomorrow's Truth Thursday, and speaking of DEI, the Department of Defense committee that makes their recommendations and is driving that train through the department has made some huge mistakes, and we'll be talking to some men and women that are pushing back against them, and they've caused them to make that mistake this week. I'm Rob Maness at Patriot.tv.